Who is Dizzy Gillespie? John Burks. Dizzy Gillespie was an American jazz trumpeter, bandleader, composer, educator, and singer. He was a trumpet virtuoso and improviser, building on the style of Roy Eldridge, but adding layers of harmonic and rhythmic complexity previously unheard in jazz. He later created his own band and developed his own signature style, known as bebop, and worked with musical greats like Cab Calloway, Ella Fitzgerald, Earl Hines, Charlie Parker, and Duke Ellington. His beret and horn-rimmed spectacles, scat singing, bent horn, pouched cheeks, and light-hearted personality have made him an enduring icon. Dizzy Gillespie was born on October 21, 1917, in Cheraw, South Carolina. Dizzy was the youngest of 9 children. He started playing the piano at 4, trombone at 12, and the trumpet at 14. For the most part, Dizzy was self-taught. Gillespie was born into a family whose father, James, was a bricklayer, pianist, and bandleader. Trumpets, saxophones, guitars, and pianos were at Dizzy's disposal. Tragically, Dizzy's father, James, died when he was just 10. From the night he heard his idol, Roy Eldridge, on the radio, he dreamed of becoming a jazz musician. He won a music scholarship to the Laurinburg Institute in North Carolina, which he attended for 2 years before accompanying his family when they moved to Philadelphia in 1935. He played in local groups and joined the orchestra of Fran Fairfax in 1935, the orchestra of Teddy Hill in 1937, the orchestra of Cab Calloway in 1939, the orchestra of Ella Fitzgerald in 1942, and the orchestra of Earl Hines in 1943. In 1937, Gillespie met his future wife, Lorraine, a chorus dancer at the famed Apollo Theater. They were married in 1940 and remained together until his death. The couple had no children, but Gillespie fathered a daughter, born in 1958, from an affair with a songwriter. When Gillespie joined Cab Calloway's orchestra in 1939, he recorded one of his earliest compositions, Pickin' the Cabbage. After an altercation between the two, Calloway fired Gillespie in late 1941. Calloway disapproved of Gillespie's mischievous pranks and his adventuresome approach to solos. One day, during rehearsal, someone in the band threw a spitball. Already in a foul mood, Calloway blamed Gillespie, who refused to take the blame. A fight occurred, and Gillespie cut Calloway in the leg, thigh, and wrist. After the two were separated, Calloway fired Gillespie. A few days later, Gillespie tried to apologize to Calloway, but he was dismissed. Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker have been attributed with the development of bebop and modern jazz. Dizzy appeared on a Lionel Hampton record, playing a solo on a tune entitled Hot Mallets, which many observers believe to be the first recorded example of what would later be called bebop. In 1945, Gillespie formed his own big band with limited commercial success that showcased the concept of big band bebop as a form of jazz. The music of Charlie Parker and me laid a foundation for all the music that is being played now, Gillespie said years later. Our music is going to be the classical music of the future. In addition to creating bebop, Gillespie is considered one of the first musicians to infuse Afro-Cuban, Caribbean, and Brazilian rhythms with jazz. His work in the Latin jazz genre includes A Night in Tunisia, among other recordings. Afro-Cuban jazz was successful because it never decreased in popularity, and it always attracted people to dance. After his work with Parker, Gillespie led other small combos, including ones with John Coltrane, Kenny Clarke, and J.J. Johnson, and put together his successful big band starting in 1947. His big band popularized bebop and made him a symbol of the new music. Gillespie and his bebop orchestra was the featured star of the 4th Cavalcade of Jazz concert. held at Wrigley Field in Los Angeles, September 12, 1948. The young maestro had recently returned from Europe, where his music rocked the continent. John Coltrane briefly became a member of this band. Gillespie's group was disbanded in 1950 due to financial problems. In 1956, he formed another big band for a cultural mission sponsored by the U.S. State Department. After that, he continued to record, perform, and lead small groups well into the 80s. On January 6, 1953, he threw a party for his wife Lorraine at Snooki's, a club in Manhattan, where his trumpet's bell got bent upward by accident. But he liked the sound so much, he had a special trumpet made with a 45-degree raised bell, becoming his trademark. In April 1995, Gillespie's trumpet was auctioned at Christie's in New York City, with other instruments used by Coleman Hawkins, Jimi Hendrix, and Elvis Presley. The battered trumpet was sold to Manhattan builder Jeffrey Brown for $63,000. The proceeds benefiting jazz musicians with cancer. Shortly after the death of Charlie Parker, Gillespie encountered an audience member after a show. They had a conversation about the oneness of humanity and the elimination of racism from the perspective of the Baha'i faith. After investigating further, he decided to become a member of the Baha'i faith that same year. When I encountered the Baha'i faith, it all went along with what I had always believed. I believed in the oneness of mankind. I believed we all come from the same source, that no race of people is inherently superior to any other, said Dizzy. During the 1964 United States presidential campaign, Gillespie put himself forward as an independent write-in candidate. He promised that if he were elected, the White House would be renamed the Blues House, and he would have a cabinet composed of Duke Ellington as Secretary of State, Miles Davis as Director of the CIA, Max Roach as Secretary of Defense, Charles Mingus as Secretary of Peace, Ray Charles as Librarian of Congress, Louis Armstrong as Secretary of Agriculture, and Thelonious Monk as Traveling Ambassador. He said his running mate would be Phyllis Diller. Campaign buttons had been manufactured years before by Gillespie's booking agency as a joke. But proceeds went to the Congress of Racial Equality, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In later years, they became a collector's item. In 1971, he announced he would run again, but withdrew before the election. In December 1991, during an engagement at Kimball's East in Emeryville, California, he suffered a crisis from what turned out to be pancreatic cancer. He performed one more night, but canceled the rest of the tour for medical reasons, ending his 56-year touring career. He led his last recording session on January 25, 1992. A longtime resident of Englewood, New Jersey, Gillespie died of pancreatic cancer on January 6, 1993, at the age of 75, and was buried in Flushing Cemetery, Queens, New York City. This is Alexander from One Track Jazz. Thanks for listening.